Jay,
Yes, sir.
before we go live, and I have to embarrass you.
I don't know where I put it.
Do we have internet here by any chance?
There are signs out there, masks beyond this point. So
Yeah, well,
Oh, we take it off when we're here on the podium.
all the way in the back.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? All right, look at that. All right, so we should be live. We're all set. I'm sorry for running a little late here. Rooms got switched to the last second, right? Because we figured we were told we're gonna have too many for the Buttons Bay room. So welcome. Let me stand over here so I can get on camera for the time being. I'm Jay. My name's on Twitch is Lord Gazumba. Once a month, Alyssa Faden, Anna Meyer, and myself, we have the Fantasy Mapping Show. It's usually on a Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And we usually have some guests, and we just talk about various topics regarding mapping in the industry. And each time we've had a show, it's gotten more and more successful, more and more popular. So I figured we bring it here to Gary Kahn and have a live audience. Note our sponsor for this show is Frog God Games. Very nice people. The person who gives us the best question during the Q&A session will get a $25 gift certificate to Frog God Games store. Okay. So why don't we introduce the panel, and then we'll go from there. So Alyssa, Anna, and Kafir, please introduce yourselves. As Anna's been
Yes.
blocking. Yes.
Okay.
hello, I'm Fear, aka KB. I make fantasy maps on mostly on deerskin leather and stuff, using wood burning, pyrography, natural pigments, primitive tools, and other cool things like that.
I'm Alyssa Faden. I'm best known for drawing my city maps. I come from a traditional ink on paper background, and I've moved now to drawing electronically or digitally on a Cintiq 24-inch HD Touch. It's basically just a big, huge tablet. I think what I bring to the cartography world is a very traditional hand-drawn style that clearly looks hand-drawn, but with all of the power of digital tools and the Control Z take back when something goes wrong.
Yes. Okay, I'm Anna Meyer, and I'm also a cartographer. I've been doing fantasy maps for a bit over 20 years, and about 10 years I've done it professionally. And my specialty have been large setting maps, the big picture, kingdoms, settings, whole worlds and stuff. And I kind of started working on my Greyhawk map over 20 years ago, and that has been my kind of signature work. And then I've done my other big project is I worked on Midgard for almost 10 years now for Cobalt Press. So those are my biggest, and I've done a lot of smaller things for about I think a dozen publishers now over the past 10 years. So that's my little accomplishments in this, so to speak. So then we wanted to start. We've had Greyhawk shows and games and stuff, and we thought that we should have a show where we talk about map making and discussing, and not so much a show where we talk about which menu to press and which button to press, but more about the concept, introducing people and new ideas and concepts and stuff like that. And then we can have live streams, and you have a lot of live streams, and I had a few, and I plan to go back to having them again when I have a computer that is fast enough that I can both work and stream at the same time. That's the powerful enough. But like so many of you know, now is not the time to buy a new computer. So that's the so those are more the time when you can actually look at all the menus and take hours to do that. So this show is more about introducing cool stuff, and then Jay is our man to do all the technical stuff.
Yes.
and all that. And
Yes, because I'm the glutton for punishment here.
yeah,
Right? So,
yep.
and thank you all for coming. How many of you have watched this show live? Okay, so less than half. Wow.
Yeah, but way more than I thought.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. So just note that I'll hand out some cards, and we'll make sure you know where we can be found. It's usually right now. It's like the third Friday of month that we have at 8 p.m. And who we had on the show before? Anna and Alyssa. Who've been some of our great guests?
The first guest I think we had was Jared Lando.
He
Yep.
was certainly one of them.
Yeah, one of the first ones, and he's an amazing cartographer. And then we Alyssa and me have talked about various topics over the past number of shows, and that's the I forgot exactly which other we should
We
have
had
been listed.
the hexagon.
Oh yes, we had Joe Wetzel from Inkwell Designs talking about, and when we talk about hexes, and since he has a whole range of products now, I think they've been merged into the Worldographer. That is kind of a cool tool. That is kind of the Hex Master tool. So and we thought we should have a hex episode because hexes are kind of a standard trope of fantasy mapping. So
Yeah, of course.
all the way from everyone remember Darlene maps and Traveler and other science fiction games that hex, and of course wargaming before then that made hexes kind of the standard of fantasy mapping. So we should have that after we've had dungeon maps. And then we've had city mapping, and we've talked about realms maps and stuff like that too. So this was, I'm thinking, since we have the audience you right here, we can have more of a ask me anything too as well. So yeah,
Absolutely. But we want to show what you and Alyssa have been working on,
and we want to show what Fear has been working on.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for leaving me out.
So this episode is a little bit then, thanks to
Hodgepodge.
Fear's presence here, kind of things that go over the top and out of the ordinary for sure, because I think Fear is the most extraordinary of fantasy map makers of any stretch of the imagination, so to speak.
Wow.
You're just but
Oh yeah.
you're doing things that no one else is doing, meaning
I'm glad to
there's like probably 50 people in the world that make big setting maps, and 500 that make city maps, and 5,000 that doodles in various dungeons or whatever. So, but I don't think there's anyone else who makes maps on deer skins.
Well, and maybe that's a good segue. So
Yeah.
maybe
Sure.
you show the audience
Yes,
your medium.
and talk a little bit what you did and how you got started and stuff like that.
We can probably pass this around. I don't think is Rob here.
Uh,
No, that's good.
no.
So he won't know. But,
He's probably watching right now.
so this is the map. We'll pass it. So be
Yes.
gentle. Do not pour your drinks on it. So I have a background in primitive skills. I used to teach various Stone Age technology, things like that, and specifically, I used to tan traditional brain tan buckskin for a living. And one day, I decided to make myself a map of Middle Earth, thinking what would a primitive map look like if it was made in Middle Earth by people who didn't have tablets or paper or things like that. Not necessarily that Middle Earth doesn't have paper, but let's not get into that. So I made myself a map of Middle Earth. It took a little figuring out. I had hides, I had natural pigments. They were just powdered pigments. I had a stick, I'm not good at drawing. So I didn't know how to transfer the map. It's a map. It's a map that's established. I'm not making it up. So I can't just eyeball it and make mistakes, because fixing mistakes on the material like that, there is no Control Z. Why are you hiding behind me?
Because you're leaning on my chair.
Oh,
I'm trying to be polite.
now I can do that. So I didn't know how to transfer it. I tried various methods of transferring it with graphite paper or things like that. A light table does not show through the hide. Nothing worked. And then I had this idea, because I was already doing wood burning. I had this idea that I could print out the actual paper map and then poke holes, or literally burn holes through the paper to have dots on the skin. And that worked. Come to find out years later that there's actually I think it's a medieval or Renaissance method of transferring drawings that was called pouncing. They used to poke holes through the canvas or the vellum, and then rub either trace with the holes that they made with a nail in the surface behind it, or they would rub charcoal through the holes and then would leave an outline. So I didn't really invent anything. I reinvented it. And so then when I had all the dots, I thought, well, I might as well connect the dots with the wood burner too, because why not? Otherwise, it'll be just a bunch of dots visible in the map, and that wouldn't look good. And that's when the magic happened. If you guys, as you're moving that, as you handling that map, you'll notice that it's three-dimensional. Feel free to touch it. Every mountain, every tree, not those symbols that are attached onto it, but every mountain and every detail is three-dimensional. And that happened in that first map, not to that degree, but it happened because the heat shrivels the skin. Just like if your skin gets burned, it shrinks. And then when I noticed, I'm like, ooh, I've got something unique. So since then, I've learned how to. And that gentleman is looking at the back of the map. And if you look at the back, you'll see that I burned a lot of the back side, and that's sort of to accentuate things on the front. So if this is the surface of the skin, if I burn on this side and I burn on this side, it's going to curve up because these two parts are going to shrink and push the middle up. But if I want to make that even more pronounced, I'll burn the back side of it, and it'll puff it even more. So that map is not as 3D as they could get because the detail on it is fairly small. So that is the latest map I've made. The first one was in 2012. This one came up because I promised before my first GaryCon in 2018, I promised I will make 3 Dungeons and Dragons maps. I made the Sword Coast first, then Ansalon from Dragonlance, and Greyhawk was going to be number 3, and I know nothing about Greyhawk, and I procrastinated for 2 years, 3 years, since no, well, the pandemic. So about 2.5 years I procrastinated, and then, well, crap, it's coming up, so I contacted Jay because I knew him from Twitch, and I said, "Hey, I need someone who knows something about Greyhawk to tell me what to do, like what area we focus on, what's important to put on there." So that was Jay was an immense help, and of course this couldn't have happened without Anna's map that I used for reference, and that goes back to Darlene's map that Anna used for reference.
Yep.
So. It's kind of a lineage, and actually, if you'd notice, if you look at the map at the bottom right, there's a shield that's just burned in. It's not painted, and it's got various tools on it. That's the symbol that Anna designed for the what is it? The
Flanice Geographical Society, and I actually used it as on my website and stuff back in the day. So
yeah, so I violated copyright in more ways than one, but that is really a nod to Anna. Because the map could not have been done without her. She even designed a lot of those symbols that are on there. So thank you, Anna, for doing an amazing job. I just took something that existed already and made it maybe different and pretty or whatever. But I did forget to put your porta potty on there.
That's a reference that I'll come to that.
We got a lot of great locations on that map,
Yeah.
though. Some fantastic, iconic locations.
Yeah. When I make the maps, so I actually do. I don't. You guys can talk about it because I don't know really what the details are. But when I make maps, I generally try to have some story that goes into that map because I like them to look and feel like maps that came from that world. So I like to ask questions: Who made this map and why? For whom? What's the purpose of this? So, and that sometimes answering those questions before you even start can help you determine what to put on the map. Because not everything has to go on. There is no map out in the world ever that's been made that has everything on it. So you have to make decisions when you approach making a map.
Yep.
And answering those questions can help you. So they sort of decided, well, it's a map made by some I don't know who the dude is.
Kind of, it was a Zagic reference map, something that he had done. But we have a question from the audience on Twitch. You said, what's considered primitive? So.
What's considered?
Yeah, why is your style considered primitive?
Well, because other than the burning, which is an electrical tool with just a heated piece of metal, I'm using Stone Age materials and techniques. Buckskin is as old as man, pretty much. We don't know how old. The oldest artifact we know of is a 10,000-year-old moccasin. It's much older than that as a technology. The brush I paint with is a piece of bone. Why bone? Because I'm lazy. I could use a stick, but sticks won't last as long. So I use a piece of bone.
Yeah.
I could make brushes out of natural materials, but they don't last very long at all because I'm really rough on my equipment. So, which is probably why I should never have a Cintiq. It will die very quickly. Um, and the pigments are all natural pigments. I don't make them myself most of the time because that would take a whole lot more time and work. And we've established I'm lazy, and so I buy natural powdered pigments. I do mix them with water and glue, and on special occasions when I really want to go even more primitive, I will mix them with the fluid from deer eyeballs. So that first map that I made, I called. It was during hunting season. I called a butcher and I went over and I cut a bunch of eyeballs out of deer heads. Um, it's a fixant for the pigment. It's basically does the job of water and glue. You know, it just sticks the pigments to the surface. I don't remember where I learned that. It's one of those things that I somehow along my career as a primitive skills instructor I heard or read somewhere the vitreous humor, yeah, that it was used as a base for pigments. I don't remember where I learned it. It might be something I completely made up in my head, but it works. So
So let's talk about if we, for a second
Yeah.
generosity. So we have,
Oh.
please, we have to, because a lot of people here that don't watch the show don't know this. So we have a fundraiser, um, and it's the Greyhawk Megastream fundraiser event. This is the fourth year. We had 11 Twitch channels participating. First year we did $1,000. Year three we did 10. So Kafir, while he was making this up, said to me, "What's your unbelievable goal that you'd love to hit during this fundraiser for St. Jude?" I said, "Well, we did 10 last year. I'd love to get 15, but 20's out there. We're double the number." So Kafir said, "If you reach $20,000, we have good donator gifts in order. He will give this map to one of the donators." And so that got us Sunday night. We're at 17. That night we got another $3,500. Very end we did $20,500 for St. Jude. So
we can pretend that it was the map.
Oh,
no,
yes.
yeah.
But that's
So
yeah.
so
But
we got
definitely.
Yeah, thank
But
you.
Yep.
So,
it was my pleasure.
so Robert Krupp, Nowicki, Phantom NJ, yes, he was the second. There was an anonymous donator who did not want to be named.
Wow.
He was the second highest and next in line for choice, and so he's good. Yep. So the community is very generous, and it's just a great thing. But you can also get this print available.
Yeah, I do have prints, and I have a booth at the vendor hall.
Yes.
So look me up.
And the prints looks fabulous.
Prints look fantastic.
Yep.
All the prints.
The prints look. I will say this. I'll toot my own horn. The prints look real.
Yeah.
I have people coming up to the table and they're like looking.
Exactly. You have to
3D.
touch the
Because
print.
I photographed them. Each map, just to turn it into a print, takes dozens of photos of different sections so that they'll be close and high res and put in focus. And then it's done with the right lighting to cast shadows, so there are real shadows in the image. I don't have to paint shadows. People ask me, "Oh my God, how do you get those shadows looking so good?" I turn on a light.
Yep.
It's easy. My secret is do something nobody else does, so they don't know how easy it is.
Yep. There you go.
It really is that.
Yep.
It's like one thing that's cool. I don't know how many of you are fans of Greyhawk and old school Greyhawk products, but there are three technically the ruins of Castle Greyhawk, the Temple of Elemental Evil, and the Milk House. All of those three icons on here, they were painted to look like their versions from the cover of that module or box set.
Yep.
Which is kind of a challenge to take an image like a painting and put it into a tiny little thing. But that's really what I enjoyed the most about this. Yeah.
Christoph,
Will you do another one of those?
If I get paid for it, yes. I do take commissions all the time. Yeah. This was one of those things that I knew I was gonna make it anyway.
Yeah, we talked
So-
about it for like 4 years now, I think. Or
Right.
something
I
like
just
that.
kept procrastinating.
Yep.
So I promised I would make one, so I'd make one, and then the fundraiser just happened to be there. So I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Throw it in.
Do we have a question? No.
Not for-
Oh, okay. I was just want to make sure. Yep.
Oh Oh, there you go.
So note
I
the,
can shut up.
the Doom Grinders on here.
Oh, that's right.
Karastein's
Uh-oh.
Castle, Narwhal, Pascarel, Verbabonk Divers, Hardbee. It's Dragon Lairs are on here. It's fantastic.
If you wonder why there are no names on it, most of my maps don't have a lot of names mostly because of the limitation of the material. To get names on there, I would either have to do a lot of planning ahead of time and get the names in first, and then put everything around them, which can lead to bad things happening. Or I put labels, just like all these symbols, I can put labels on top that have the name. That's the easiest. If I make a mistake spelling a name, I don't have to worry about fixing the actual thing. I can just toss it and make another label. Problem is that the labels are bigger than the actual name. It's not like a digital map that has the visible area between the letters, right? The label is going to be much larger than the actual name, so you end up covering a lot of surface area of a lot of work with just labels. So I prefer to put as few names as possible and just try to make the icons recognizable. So, but that depends on the world. So some worlds like Middle Earth, you see a hobbit hole, you know it's a hobbit hole, you know what you're looking at. If you see Minas Tirith or Barad-dûr, all those locations, you immediately know. If you're a fan, you know. You see a little icon. Game of Thrones, Westeros is just all castles. So in that case, there were all the famous sigils of each house, so you put those on. So the same thing here. Some of the locations are sigils, most of them are, and some of them are the iconic look of the Temple of Elemental Evil or the Doom Grinder, or things like that.
Thank you. Please, if you have any questions, we're gonna
Yeah.
take questions the whole time during this show and the discussion. So wonderful, Kafir. So Alyssa, what we got? We got some fun stuff.
I
there.
should have had him go last. That's a hard act to follow.
Oh,
but
that's okay.
it actually kind of dawned on me that in many ways this is kind of almost like a journey of mediums, because Kafir here is obviously going very primitive, like the caveman he is. And over here we have very high digital, and Anna's obviously going to talk about that. And I kind of fall somewhere in between. I'm best known for my city maps, and I'll hold up an example right now.
We wanted to see
Especially
that.
for hating Tom Tullis, but the maps are set.
This is
I can hold it.
London, 1890. This is my gaslight map that I've been working on. This is for Chaosium. This has been a journey, but one of the first things that you'll sort of hopefully look at when you see one of my maps is like, holy heck, is she insane? That's kind of what I like to try and bring to the table, is a lot of detail, and then add more detail. I can't stop myself. This is my current project, but I pour just as much love, obviously, into everything that I work on. And actually, before I go too much further and actually hand out some examples, I have a little bit of an announcement of my own, because I've actually just been convinced to draw Greyhawk city maps.
Oh,
Yes, and I know which one it is. So anyone want to guess? Because he shared that with me in secret. He shouldn't have, Mr. Duffy, right? That one.
Hey, I'm not saying anything.
oh,
It's a city in the Pomarge. There you go. You guessed.
awesome.
So I have taken it on for each quarter, drawing Greyhawk maps, and I'm hoping
awesome.
I can pour as much love as I do into all of my maps, but hopefully do some Greyhawk stuff without getting too much into the canon and the. Yes. Maybe we could even pass this around,
Sure,
let people sort of look at it. It's fairly robust because it is canvas, and we've got on that. My style, and I'll kind of pass around a couple here. My style is ink on paper. There you go. Sort of maybe pass those around. I actually draw ink on paper, and you'll see that in a lot of these, and then I color digitally. I have started to actually draw digitally as well. But for example, that one that the gentleman in the blue shirt is holding right now, that is Dubrovnik, which is a real life city. And I drew that by actually looking at Google Maps, zoomed in on my phone, and then was drawing. And obviously removing buildings that were more modern, so we were kind of getting back to what it looked like in ancient times. That one over there for the gentleman in the white shirt, that is also ink on paper. Yes.
So a lot of it's ink on paper, ink on canvas. What is your error process?
That's a good point.
That's a really good question. So obviously drawing digitally, which is what I almost exclusively do nowadays, very, very, very easy. Ink on paper, lots of care. Um, I draw pencil first. It's as simple as that. Um, Anything that's major, whether it be a coastline, the rivers, the shape of a forest, perhaps, where major POIs are going, I will do all of those in pencil first. A nice light pencil, nothing too hard. Um, Gentle strokes, so I'm not sort of etching into the paperwork until I've got the shape and the details and the POIs that I like. And then you can start inking it in. And odds on, you're going to be absolutely fine. And if you make a small mistake, embrace it, roll with it. And I mean that. There was one time where I was actually labeling ink on paper, which I wouldn't recommend. And it was pre-internet, and back then it's like where do you get names from? You can't go to a random name generator. So I'm looking around my bedroom for inspiration, book covers, names, you name it. And I had a candle, so I'm naming this area in the country, and I wrote candle. And I went, what the hell have I just done? That is a stupid name. Ink on paper. Well, embrace it. And I wrote Candle Fields of Bavaria. And it ended up being the inspiration for where Will of the Wisps come every 100 years, and they congregate. And I kind of got some story out of that. And I think there's only been one major mistake I made with ink on paper. And there are some very rough erasers that you can get to try and deal with that, but not recommended. But honestly, pencil. Pencil in the important stuff, and then and anything else. If you get a building shape slightly wrong and it's not super important, doesn't matter. That's the shape of the building now. It's okay.
Do you draw at scale?
Yeah. So depending, right? So obviously the Chaosium London map, there is a scale to that. I have to get that right. And what my method typically is, once I understand what the population of the city or the town should be, I can typically look up online ancient or medieval towns and cities of a similar population and get the square mile of that. And if you actually then sort of draw down your shape, you can approximate what the square mileage is, and that's going to give you the scale. And then I draw a little scale bar as a throwaway that matches that. So let's say, for the sake of argument, I know that this is a mile across by maybe half a mile or something. Well, I know this is a half mile across. I can then mark that off in its increments. And then I will actually just pencil in, well, so this would be a medium-sized building, this would be a large building, this would be a little shack. And I'll have those. And then I'll always use them as a visual reference to kind of ensure that my buildings feel about right for the scale of the map. And that's how you can kind of look at one of my city maps and go, okay, yeah, that feels about right. That feels like a medium-sized town. That's how I kind of do it.
Have you ever exceeded the size of an actual city in an ancient world? And here's what I'm. I've worked on one gaming supplement where you have magic to supplement, like to purify water, make things travel through the city a little faster, etc. Have you ever built anything that's too big for its era?
Yeah.
And how big did that city get? How many miles across? How many people?
The largest one, well, the largest one I ever did, actually, I don't have a sample of it here. It was actually a private commission that someone wanted me to draw. And I was probably drawing little buildings this big, but the canvas was like this big. It was truly huge. And there's no way it had the water source to sustain it. In all truth, I don't try to go into those waters too much. I'm a firm believer that there's almost something in all of our minds when you look at a map. Even one of the Egyptian maps that were kind of sort of floating around, they had the scarab-like shapes, but it still felt right. It still felt plausible, right? So I try to keep my maps within the realm of plausibility, because I think that's the first thing that the mind thinks of, and not go too much into rivers running uphill and no water source and that type of thing, because I think the brain immediately locks into that.
Yeah.
And it's okay to do. I've done it. It just isn't my default.
So you said you do use like satellite photography, Google Maps to kind of give you an idea of an area. Does that work well for you? Have you found good areas to work off of, or historic areas that work well for you?
Oh yeah. So that's a really interesting subject, and honestly, one I think we could do an entire show on. To be honest with
Yeah.
you,
Inspiration.
there is, because you've got the whole thing from inspiration through to actuality, right? So the London map is clearly one. 1890 London. Well, don't have much leeway on suddenly just drawing a random building in the middle of the map on that one. Someone out there is going to notice it and go, "What's that in the middle of Charing Cross? That did not exist in that particular era." So that one, the type of research for that was, honestly, I was hitting up the Library of Congress, the Museum of London, the Museum of Scotland. I was very disappointed in the Library of London. I've got to be honest with you. Their scans ended up being like this big. I'm like, well, come on, guys, what are we doing? The Library of Congress was rich, and they had big files. I'm talking massive files. I'm like, pay dirt. So that for that type of thing, I can go to the source, so to speak. Now, on the other side, we've got inspiration, and I love looking at ancient cities, just inspiration, because they're not like American cities, right? They're not planned. Some were planned. Some European cities were absolutely planned, but you still end up getting this dynamic growth to them that influences the shape of the streets, where the citadel was, if there even was a citadel. You know, how they grew up around the water source or a trade area and the likes. So I am almost constantly looking at renditions of medieval or just our interpretation of ancient maps, whether it be Rome or Ostia. Um, One recently, I was actually Pompeii. Pompeii, I think, is wonderful. Just look at the shape of Pompeii, kind of how they laid out the streets and such, and that's actually kind of a planned look. But I always look at those for general inspiration for things. How did they, honestly? One of my favorite was an old map of Boston, and the way they did the harbors and the dockyards. That stuck with me, and I apply that then to future maps, and it kind of feels real because of it. Because I took it from a real source.
What, do you have a really good source of some of these ancient maps? I would look into it.
A lot of them, honestly, are books. I mean, you know, I own so many books of a historical nature, but there are wonderful online resources. And you know, you chance across something and you bookmark it, and you end up with a small little library of just. There's actually a gentleman nowadays who's building Rome in 3D.
Yep.
There was a model of it made, I think, back around the 50s, maybe 40s, maybe earlier. But there is a gentleman 3D modeling ancient Rome.
Yep.
Yep. And it's a gorgeous piece that he's creating. He's become a resource for me because I'm drawing ancient Rome. So I'm actually looking at his 3D model, and I'm looking at some other resources going, okay, so this is what this building looks like, but this is what the other buildings around it look like. Bookmarked, use it as a resource.
And they're probably using whatever fragmentary information. Because I know at one point there was essentially a fire marshal with a model of Rome in the ancient era, right? In the Roman era.
Yes. Yeah, there is a fragment. Yes. Yeah, I wish the whole thing survived too,
Well, we
obviously.
all do.
For antique maps, I'm sorry, but there are at least two or three that I know of. I can't name them right now off the top of my head, but look for antique map dealers online, and a lot of their online galleries will be high resolution images, maps that are hundreds of years old, hundreds. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
So, you do focus mostly on cities. Have you ever done maps that are maybe foresty or ocean based?
Oh yes. So I am best known for my city maps, but I have drawn world maps. I have drawn area maps, much like on the scale that Anna works on, but just in a completely different style. And several times I've actually had to draw predominantly water maps, which can be very interesting. In fact, I think it's New Comet Games over in the forum right now. They asked me to draw a map for their latest Call of Cthulhu, and it's basically drawing the Pacific Ocean. I'm like, well, that's a pretty easy map. I've got that one. How do I make that interesting? You know.
I love Pirate Adventures and those maps.
And for those, it's all about those extra little details and those illustrations that they put on there, right? And even the latitude and longitude lines, it just starts to add a different feel. You have to start zooming in on different map, let's call them decorations, I think, for that type of thing.
If you haven't found it yet, the city of Freeport is
Mhm.
really gorgeous map.
Yep.
Online
I have that box set. It's great,
So
and it was early too. And oh no, Freeport. Yeah, Freeport. It became early. Yeah. Mhm.
Like the Free Ronin published a map that he
Yep.
opened to run inside
Mhm.
in one of their books, and it's a really big city.
Chris Pramis. It's a really nice publication. In fact, when we had Chris on one of our shows, he said that that what location in Lordship of the Isles. He said that should be placed. Yeah, so he had that in mind with the Greyhawk. It seems like a lot of those creators always go back to having a Greyhawk thought with it. It's a wonderful, wonderful. I mean, that book is thick chock of information too. It's just fantastic.
So, Anna, why don't we step now into the truly digital realm?
Meaning, how can I beat this? Now I'm floored here. This is you already bribed the audience 5 times over. Fear had some cool map to show that he sent me on Facebook. So I'm going to. Sorry if whatever comes up. I have no clue, but it's here we go.
I don't know if you can see it, but you should probably be able to tell
Yeah.
at least a little bit.
Here we go.
For those of you looking for inspiration or overly concerned with accuracy, that's a map of Europe
Yeah.
from the 1500s.
Yep.
Okay. There's a whole Wikipedia page.
Well,
about it.
Africa
This is the Queen of Europe. Europa Regina is the name of the map,
Yeah.
and it's Europe standing upward. So that's Africa in the top left.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god!
Bottom line is do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
Be creative.
Yeah.
And if you are a dungeon master who just wants an accurate map for your game, I'm guessing we're talking D&D here because it's scary fun.
Mhm.
Right? If you want an accurate map for your game, that's fine. But for your players, it doesn't need to look anything like the actual land.
Yep.
Right? Then you come back to the actual story of the map. If you
Mhm.
made it, why? If you made a mistake, who cares? The original person who made the map made a mistake.
Yep.
Players will figure it out when they get there and there's no mountain where there's supposed to be.
Yep.
Who cares?
And that's actually really, really true because, like, a few years ago, I was asked to draw Britannia for Golden Goblin, and it's an Invictus map. They asked me because I'm obviously from Britain. But if you actually research the maps of Rome that the Romans did, they didn't care about land shape. They cared about roads.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
they didn't even lay them out on the actual direction the roads went in. They didn't care. Just get on this road and it will lead you to this next location. And it looked honestly like some kind of London Underground or the New York Underground map. Fascinating, just a different perspective. And the way they drew actually Britain, it was a triangle. Seriously, it was just a triangle. It's like, yeah, there's yobbos up there, don't worry about it. You know? And so there is a perspective. It's like you don't worry too much about, I guess, the accuracy of it, and then sometimes purposely introduce inaccuracies.
Look at your favorite novels, and then look at maps and find dead zones. Right? In Lord of the Ring. I mean, Tolkien was a little crazy. He went a little too far detailed, but but even he had dead zones in his map. I did a commission of a map of Randland from the Wheel of Time. There's a giant area in the middle that has nothing. And I asked the customer, who was a mega fan of it, and I'm like, "Why? What is in there? It's boring. Can I put something there?" And he's like, "No, there's nothing there." I'm like, why? Because the story never goes there. The characters never go there. You don't have to invent every single detail and to have a map.
So, yeah, and when we go back to ancient maps, there were often a different purpose. We also used the maps only being used for navigation, meaning to find your way from A to B, whether you're on a ship, in a plane, or in a car, or hiking. But if you go back to ancient maps, when this map was made, maps were primarily tools of politics to impress others with and stuff. That was something that a king had in his throne room or something in order to impress others how big his domain was, or how much riches and stuff that were in the domain. And various churches and others did it in order to show their conquest and stuff. So to distort terrain and make it look favorable or impressive or something or exotic, that was part of the game. The actual what the land actually looked like was kind of not interesting because that was not the purpose of the map. And that's something I think we can think about. And I often want to now think about what would elven maps look like, or dwarven maps, or orc maps, and others. Aboleths, what kind of weird maps would they make, so to speak? That's kind of, and mind flayers and stuff. So start thinking outside the box. I'm only on the concept stage of these things, but Fear and Alyssa have kind of got my name, my mind to wander in new directions.
Speaking of mind flayer maps, it's just like a bunch of different sized circles.
Yeah, yeah.
How many conscious?
Exactly. You can kind
minds
of
are
yep,
there?
yep. So that's kind of cool. And then in the fantasy world, we also have different. Let me stand up so I can see everyone here. Meaning, in the fantasy world, we also have different planes. Meaning, how do you map the abyss, or hell, or some other thing, the astral plane and stuff that goes in every direction. And it's the speed of your mind that determines the distance, not the actual physical distance, which is kind of makes mapping really challenging. So those are kind of really interesting concept to start working with, and to me those are really interesting challenges. And now I don't know exactly how I can continue and beat that, because this was one hell of a performance.
You can match it, right?
Well, we'll see. We can do something. So before, because there might be some people here that are not um, haven't seen my latest work and stuff. So let me. I hope the internet connection is good enough here. Yeah, it is. So this is the latest version of my Greyhawk map, and the projector is not that good, but we have to live with it. So this is the map I've been working on for a bit over 20 years, and this is the 2022 edition. And it doesn't look that impressive when you just see it like this.
Oh
but,
no, not at all.
but let me zoom in here so you can see the level of detail here. So that is the level of detail across the whole thing. There's several thousand locations, and if you count the heraldry and stuff, I think there's about 10,000 items or something like that, maybe 12,000 items on it. Okay. Oh yeah, I tried to, and we'll see if we can get it to. Yeah, let's see here. That is probably slightly better. The problem is that it focused good in the middle, but not the bottom at the top, so it's kind of screwy there.
You know what? I'm just going to put this on your monitor.
Oh yeah, if you want the audience to see, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah,
That's a great
yeah.
idea. That way they can
Yep.
see. Yeah, perfect. Yep. There you go.
Okay, keep going.
Yep. So okay.
Could you comment on kind of stylistically how you do mountains? Because I know like this is very much more of a realistic, I think, approach than the traditional fantasy maps of just a.
Yeah, let me bring some mountains and some terrain in. We go to this area here because this is some of the most kind of elevation difference and stuff, so we can kind of get people. So this map is done using 25-year-old technology. So and the problem with that when I started it, I got a certain look, so I kept using the same tools even if they were obsolete long ago, so to speak. So the tools I used for creating the terrain is a program called Brace. It was one of the first programs that could create virtual terrain, 3D terrain in a computer. One of the very first that was originally came out for the Macintosh in '97, I think, or '96, or something like that. And when I saw it in a magazine, I was like, I want that. And so I almost ran up to they had one store in Stockholm that sold Macintoshes. And I looked at the specs and they say, oh, it will cost about $5,000 and or a little bit more than maybe seven or something like that. And I was almost buying it then and there, so to speak, but I never used Macs. But thankfully I went back home and find a phone number in that ad to the company up in Seattle, I think it was, and managed to call them and ask them, no, we're working on a Windows version. They're coming out in next year or something. So I was like, oh God, that's good. So I actually managed to get so they sent me a copy early in 96 or something like that. So I was one of the first users of Bryce. And when I started, it was very disappointing. It didn't look anything like these beautiful screenshots they had in the ad. And I worked like 500 hours and were ready to give up. But then finally, I started getting results that looked good. The problem was that the terrain didn't actually have the right shape, but render it from the top down, it looked good. So I was like, what the heck, just go with it. So I just, and the map is rendered in small areas, probably about this big. And so the whole thing is probably about 8,000 or so of these little renders. And each of the render took 1 hour or two to do. So it's about 20,000 hours of rendering time just to get it done. Because you have to realize this is back in the day when I had like a Pentium 90 with like 16 megabytes of memory, and my hard drive was like 200 megabytes or something. So I placed the bet on Moore's law will kind of help me get faster and faster and better. So I just bought, and this was back when I had a career where I actually earned real money. So that meant that I could buy a new computer almost every year and get it faster, better, and so on. So what took a couple of hours in the beginning, when I took up Rise on my newest computer and rendered, what used to took like 2 hours, that took like 8 seconds and was done on my new beefy computer that is 5 years old. So Bryce is used for the terrain. And then I took these little Bryce renderings into Photoshop and touched them up and stitched them together and paint over the ugly bits and stuff like that. And then gradually I got the whole thing in place, so to speak. And then I painted on the rivers because Bryce couldn't do rivers. So, and then I used Illustrator to put the roads on, the names, the symbols. I used Illustrator to create the heraldry and assemble the final map, so to speak. So that's kind of the technical process on this map. And thanks to making it look consistent, I kept using Bryce pretty much up until I got to Hetmona Land. And let's take a look at the big latest addition to it, so to speak, because this is actually done. The northern part here is done using the old process, but the southern part here, I faked it because now I had 20 years of experience. So what I did was that now I didn't need Bryce. I just did this in Photoshop from scratch. And so what have taken me 5 years to do in the first bit, this part here is probably about half the size of landmass of the whole planet. So what have taken me about 5 years to do real time, I did in less than 5 weeks in Photoshop. So you can, if you can work smarter, you can, and yeah, you can do a lot more, so to speak. And this is some fake. It's a lot of different techniques. I realized I wanted mountains and stuff, so I looked at the world map and height maps and so on, and I took it into World Machine and created terrain and simply created the shadow maps. And then I took the shadow on top and just painted in the colors under it. And it's not perfect by any means, but it's okay. It's okay, so to speak. It looks better than the old one, but in my opinion, it's not really there. But I needed Hetmona Land as a reference map, so okay, then I did it, so to speak. So it was more of a test run to see if I could map the rest of the planet this way. And if I could do that in a few weeks, I can probably do the rest of the planet in a year if need be. So that's some of the things that I'm actually looking at. And people who were here on the previous seminar that we had yesterday, let's see here. I need my glasses so I can see which one is which here. There we go. We can see I did a model of Earth, the planet for the world of Greyhawk, this year, earlier this year, and now I plan to do next year to do an upgrade. So Hypnonaland was kind of a test run for working. It will not be that much for the whole planet right away because that will be a bit too much. But I will definitely do much bigger than this, and there will be some requirement and stuff like that. And here it comes to another issue with map making is that when you're map making for a community or a publisher or something, you you need to map responsibly, so to speak, because if you do either do something good or something really bad, it will affect the community and it will affect your career. So you have to kind of do it gradually, and especially when you map something that is already been partially described, and there is now an idea, or in the case of Greyhawk, multiple ideas of what the planet is. So I wanted to take this gently and slowly and kind of work towards it and kind of see what the community will like and what they will kind of adopt, so to speak. So I don't want to throw out anything down into what I don't want to be too harsh on this because I don't want to start debates and flame wars and stuff like that. So it is kind of tricky. So you have to do it nice and slowly and kind of get the feel for what the community likes, so to speak. If you do it for your own home game, no worries, you can just go with anything you like. But if you do it for a community and if you do it for a publisher who pays you, then of course you do what they tell you to do. So those are some of their projects, and this will be. I'm kind of a little bit hesitant what technology. I will use Photoshop right away just to paint and stuff, but I'm also thinking about using new tool called Gaia, and in conjunction with World Machine, that is the latest in 3D terrain building and stuff. So I can show you a couple of test runs I did on Gaia. So here we have. So let's see here. Let's see. Yeah, so we have some. I thought we could open it. Yeah, so we have some test renders and stuff done, and I must say I'm impressed. Gaia can do some really cool stuff. So you can actually do renders that this render has. This is the porta potty scale, so it's 5 feet per pixel. I tried to use that going up, and you can this the projector is not that good, but you can actually see real vegetation and stuff sticking out. So you can do things that are just mind-blowingly cool with this one. So we have here's another one. You can do like trees and you can do lava fields and you can do water and it's kind of it's amazing. You can do things that are really cool. And this is kind of the next generation. So this is 20 some years newer technology, so to speak, that you can do. And it's really cool. That one didn't come out that good on the projector. So let's see what we can. Here is some crater test because of course you have to do cool craters and stuff. And so you can make fantasy terrain and stuff that are really good. And the stuff like this you've been able to do for quite some time. There are two issues when you come into this. One is rivers and drainage, because if you make a large area, you want the rivers to start high and then meander through the terrain and end up in into lakes and stuff in a believable fashion. And that is unbelievably difficult for software to do that, apparently, because it's easy to make these fractal stuff that's been done for 40, 50 years, but to actually believe how rivers carve through it and how they do it, that is very difficult. And then you have another problem when you do fantasy maps and you work with 3D tools. It is that the problem is that you already have someone that told you that the river needs to come from here and it needs to go to that specific point. And if the fractal kind of decides to do something else, it's very hard to tweak it. And that's been something that I've been nagging at the companies I've been working with on stuff like this to actually make it editable. Thankfully, all the video game producers start having the same problem and the same kind of criteria for which tools they use. So that is coming into to the pipeline, so to speak. So that's something that we in the fantasy cartography community can really benefit from, the crossover into video games, because video games used to have silly small worlds that was not believable, but anyone who played Skyrim and other of the latest games now is starting having worlds, literally enormous worlds, so to speak. So Unreal 5, for instance, and stuff can really handle huge worlds. And that's why my new projects, I'm actually doing all the data so I can import it into game engines and then use game engines as a tool, and also geographical information systems. So we can actually use real cartography tools and cool tools to visualize our worlds. And there's two reasons. One is to make things that looks this cool, but the other main reason is that I want you guys to be able to change it. Meaning, I want a road through here, I want an orc's nest here, I want a dragon lair there, and well, that demon they burnt down the forest, so I don't want any forest there. To be able to have the things tweaked afterwards, I think that's one of the key issues, because every DM wants to make the world their own, and I want the map technology to reflect that, so to speak. Yeah.
How would you, how, if we're a home GM
Yeah.
designing or changing the world, how would we go about it?
There's very different. You can, if you're really keen on doing things, you can kind of step in and redesign the terrain, but that means that you have to have 500 hours
Yeah,
of 3D
I'm trying
knowledge,
to
which means that
work.
of 1,000 DMs there will be two that wants to invest that. The second kind of step, if you want to do it more, that is that I provide a layered Photoshop file, meaning that the basic terrain and the shadow is one, the basic color of the terrain is on one layer, the shadow that gives all the shading from the mountains is on another one, and then you have things like roads is on a separate layer, and buildings is on another layer, and things like agricultural fields and stuff. That means that you can kind of say, I want a road there, so you can paint in a road, or you can erase a road and stuff like that, and that makes it a lot easier. Instead of
You can
500
insulate it to just one layer.
Yep. And that also means that you can export it out as a mask if you want to change the style and stuff. So that means that instead of 500 hours, you might invest 5 hours to learning GIMP and Photoshop to do it. So that kind of, instead of two, there might be 200 out of 1,000 DMs who can want to invest that enough to editing skills in order to tweak it for their own campaign, so to speak.
You mentioned GIMP and Photoshop.
Yeah.
For those who might use Photoshop already, do you use any particular brush tips when you're painting in Photoshop, and have you ever shared them, or you thought about sharing them with your patrons that have a brush pad?
Yeah, the brushes are not particularly tricky when it comes to painting textures. It's that is normally not that critical, so to speak, because you set the amount of opacity and how much of the kind of the width you want, so to speak, and how harsh you want it. It's normally that, but so that's fairly easy. But when it comes to textures and stuff, yes, I've shared some earlier on with my patrons, and I'm going to share it again, so to speak, and also share the raw files, because one of the most important things I think is that when you have a template, because different layers have different blend modes and stuff, and that can take a long time to figure it out. So if I have a piece of terrain in a layered Photoshop file, I can just say going on and simply say texture, and that means that you can repaint things and all the shading is still there, and then you can have like a road layer and stuff like that. So that is, I think, a huge time saver for the end user to go in and change stuff like that. And then we have a whole other thing that when we come into digital maps like geographical information systems, because that means that you can easily tweak it and change it, because then not only can you change it on that level, you can, it's data, so you can present it in different formats and different scales, resolutions, and stuff like that. You can, for instance, say, I want an Orcish map, or I want a map in Olman or some other fantasy language. You can change the fonts into that language, for instance. You can do things like, I want parchment instead of the terrain colors, and various things like that. Very easy, or comparatively easy, because you can have a style sets and templates. So you can simply say, oh, download this style sheet, and then take this map data and click on that button, and all of a sudden it looks like a parchment or something instead. So that opens that like a whole new generations of tools that opens up a lot of cool possibility for end users to change and tweak and do things with it.
So why don't we discuss what future projects? You want to? Is
Yeah.
that how you want to go, Melissa? What do you think?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So why don't we all three talk about what we got cooking coming
Yeah.
up, and then after that we'll take more general questions from the
Sure.
group. Does that make sense for everyone? Sound good? So Kafir,
What do I have coming up?
yeah, what are you excited about? Like or are you just gonna do more maps? Are you gonna do any specific ones? Or
Well, yeah, I've got a commission coming up. One of my Twitch, I do stream on Twitch, all my work. So one of my Twitch viewers, her husband, when he was a kid, drew a map, fantasy map all the places he and his brother would hang out in, and they named them all and all that. So she wants me to make that. $2 can put into the gift. So that would be pretty cool. And then I know that I got another commission for First Age Middle Earth, which will be really cool because the customer that commissions me for those maps, he is the best customer there is as far as he will give me an entire presentation on what goes where and why, and about 50 different Easter eggs we can put in there, and who made the map. Come to my booth if you get a chance, and I'll show you the map of Numenor that he commissioned me. There are like a dozen different things in there that just point to various characters and references from the books that you really have to dig to know. Like, why would he? But it's really cool because it makes the map come to life. So I'm looking forward to working on that. Those are the only two projects I currently have in the pipe. One of my personal projects that I would like to someday do, because I'm a big fan of Middle Earth, I would like to make a map of Middle Earth from Sauron's perspective. So I'd like to make an orc map of Middle Earth, like a conquest map.
Yeah.
It'll be flipped completely upside down because in all maps of Middle Earth you see Mordor is at the bottom. In this case, Mordor is going to be at the top because it's the most important thing. And all the iconography and everything is going to be orc stuff. So that one's going to be tough because black speech, there isn't really a whole lot out there. Tolkien didn't really, there isn't a whole built language like Elvish. So, yeah, that's pretty much.
and so everyone can reach you. What's the easiest way to reach you?
cavegeekart
Okay.
at gmail.com or my website, cavegeekart.com. I do want to say something about a big takeaway from what Anna was talking about.
Please.
Her entire process. I'm a mod of a big Facebook group. I'm one of the mods of a big Facebook group of fantasy map making and world building. And probably the most common problem or challenge that beginners have is that the daunting task of how do I map my whole world? What tools do I use? Oh, what's the best? How do you map a planet? One piece at a time. She didn't do it all at once. It's taken her how many years?
Oh yeah, took me 20 years to get to that map you see there.
So
it's about 8
just
years
one
of
piece
work.
at a time.
Yeah.
Pick a small area.
Yep.
Take a piece of paper and a pencil. Don't be afraid, right?
Yep.
And then you'll finish that, and maybe it'll suck. It doesn't matter if it sucks. Next month you'll decide to put it on the computer and make it a little better, and then you'll map the area next to it. That's how you get to an entire planet. She didn't do it all in one day.
Yep.
So don't be afraid to just do it. Just pick a small area, a piece, and have fun with it.
Yeah, and look at it as a process. Cartography is not like not the art is that you work on it and you create a masterpiece and then it's done. Cartography is an ongoing process, in my opinion. Meaning, I change my map almost every game session I have, or every time I sit down and plan, I add stuff and so on. That's why I never printed my own version because I would rather buy a monitor and have it. I printed small bits of it for various sessions, but to print one huge world map, it will be obsolete in a heartbeat for me. So that it's more of an ongoing thing. It's like stat blocks or a character sheet. It's an ongoing process. but it's different. There might be a time when I want to print a masterpiece and hang it on the wall, but it depends on the purpose of the map and the type of map. And for a really good, intense, deep role-playing game campaign, you need different types of maps. You need player handout maps, you need big reference maps, you need detail maps and stuff. So it becomes a whole system of mapping for your campaign.
Oh, listen.
So, what have I got going on? Well, we all know I'm going to be doing Greyhawk Cities now.
Yeah.
Let's just
Welcome to
assume that I'm
Greyhawk.
going to do that for a few years. I'm also going to be doing. I got really inspired by the London Gaslight map. Like, I really enjoyed the research process to it. I love it actually just researching the styles that they used back then. So my intention is actually to do no commissions and to draw lots of old cities. I want to draw New York. I want to draw Shanghai, Paris, all from a period perspective, and to really try and draw a lot more Chaosium Cthulhu inspired pieces. They won't be official by any stretch of the imagination, but if you're running Masks of Nyarlathotep or Orient on the or Horror on the Orient Express, I want to be able to give you battle maps, map components, Roll20 components, city maps, country maps that are all researched and accurate that you can bring into your gaming sessions, or honestly, just hang on a wall because it's a beautiful piece. So that's where I'm going to be turning my attention now, is those two projects for the next X amount of years.
You also have a Patreon.
I do have Patreon. We all have a Patreon.
Mhm. Oh, you don't have a Patreon? Okay. See, there you
I
go.
do want to say one thing. So, not that. So this year, and indeed a couple of years ago, I was honoured to be able to draw the convention map. A couple of years ago, obviously, the convention, we had COVID, couldn't do it. The map never really got out there at all. It's okay. I don't donate my time for doing this because it's GaryCon, and I personally am a big gamer, and being able to donate my time is my contribution to the convention. But what I would ask is, we do have some limited prints of this on the Noble Dwarf stall, because they're the ones that actually print this. This is archival quality canvas, doesn't fade in the sun or anything. I would really appreciate it if you guys popped over there, took a look at them. I'm not saying you have to buy one, but if you could just show a little bit of support to them, I'm sure that they would absolutely, love it, and I would too.
If you find my booth, that's next door. If you find that booth, I'm next door.
Yep.
So I need to know myself. How did you and Mr. Duffy hook up with this high court project? He just approached you and said, "Can you do this?"
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool. See, that's how it's done.
That's
How it's done.
And for me, it's interesting. And in all fairness, Anna's been working on me for, I want to say, the last year. You should do City Match with Greyhawk. You should do City Match with Greyhawk. So
Yeah.
this was the final sort of catalyst. I was like, you know what? Maybe I should.
But now you realize you need to read for 20 hours more than for every.
See, this is why I said I didn't want to do it.
worried about that stuff.
Because, yeah, because
This is why I didn't want to do it.
So,
Yeah.
well,
yeah, but that is a serious issue we need to kind of address a little bit. And it's if you map for your home game, meaning you're the king and the master of of your universe, you can map it any way you want. But if you want to map for a publisher, or if you want to map for a community, that means that you have to start reading and getting to know the stuff you're mapping. And for me, I usually spend 5 to 10 times the more time to study something than actually mapping it. And a lot of people don't realize that the research is the difficult bit. And when it comes to commissions, I've say no to the things that I say no to is more often about access to information or the time it takes to read it than the money. Yeah, so it more often derails because that's like an author approached me and said, "Oh, can you map I have a set of books that are set in world so and so, my world. Can you map them?" And I said, "Well, yeah. Do you have sketches?" No, but I can send you the books. And they'll say, "How many pages is that?" Like 1,200 pages. And then can I pay you like $1,000? I need twice that just to read the books and take notes. And so think about that. That's the hard part. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you do the smaller scale map and large scale?
No, I've done the large scale maps, and I've done a couple of city maps, and a couple, and we also done zoomed in and done some details for a couple of adventures. So yeah, I think it's about, yeah, the big maps have been poster maps, and then parts of the books, so to speak, and then a few other maps here and there, odds and ends. Yeah, and there you have another problem because a lot of that is not even written when you do the maps. So you have to kind of work in back and forth with the writers and designers of it. And if that is often a group of them, and they get a chance to, oh, that didn't look good, and an editor changes something, and all of a sudden there is no lake there, or the mountain range is on the western side or the eastern side, and stuff like that can really screw a project up because they think, oh, can't you just edit it because we edit the text. And so there are a lot of things that happen that way. So all of a sudden, I have much more appreciation for bad maps in fantasy games because I've seen how bad, how easy it is to get it, to not get everything right, so to speak, or how difficult that is. Yep.
I have a question for Anna and Lisa on, since you're both European background,
Yeah.
knowing ancient cities, older cities in Europe, the buildings were all right jumbled up against each other, and maybe a central courtyard,
Yep.
kind of backyard kind of thing. A lot of the fantasy maps that I see that are particularly made by Americans seem to be kind of more like American cities where there's space between all the houses.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any comments on, do you get like kind of conflicting guidance from authors that want you to do it the American way, or do you kind of, how do you decide which way to view a city?
Well, so for me, and that's a really good question. For me, it's one of the first questions I'm going to ask is what let's say culture are we trying to evoke here in our viewer? Let's just start there. And what period are we drawing? So is this an ancient period? Is this a modern or futuristic period? And that's going to honestly change everything. And if we're typically drawing more of our sort of high fantasy, and I think we expect more of a European feel for the most part, unless we're kind of like trying to get more of a Mediterranean sort of look. But I start there. It's like, what part of our world and what era in our world do we want this map to feel like? And then I will adjust what I'm drawing and how I'm drawing it accordingly.
And the other, and I totally agree with that, and I also think that there might be a tie-in Europe because you have a lot of this stuff next door, and you've been traveling to it, you even live in it. I mean, some of the houses I lived in Sweden were older than this country. So that means that they were almost 300 years old. And you walk out and you have castles and stuff like that in viewing distance sometimes. So even if they're rebuilt, they still had a little bit of that medieval feel to them. But also, one of the things I think is also important, especially if you want to go into become a cartographer and working for hire, so to speak, is that you have to realize people hire you because you have the visual look and interest. They don't. They are often writers and stuff like that. They can write poetry and cool things in text that I will take me years to even conceive of writing that. But so it's that visual, meaning we think visually, and I think cartography means that you have to think visually in a kind of structural way, so to speak, in order to convey information through geometry and somehow, so to speak. And that is something that you need to kind of, and often is that the client, they don't know what they want until they see it. When they see it, they don't, oh, that's not what I'm asking. So one of the tricks is that do something haphazard, a little bit whatever, just to give them something to discuss, something to look at, something to discard. So don't work on something perfect and then hand it over and say, no, that's not what I wanted. Even sketching. So sketching, prototyping, concept and stuff is really important because they hire you because they don't think, and it's not their thing, so to speak, to do it. If they were good at that type of thinking and doing, they would have done it themselves. So that's something that I've learned over the years, that It's like they know what they want when they see it, but before then they can't even ask for it sometimes.
Good question.
Yep. Yeah,
Go
Kristen.
for it, Crystal.
What you were just saying actually brought to mind a question from the other two artists. Like computer, especially, like, do you do like second drafts? Like,
No.
like, so you got like one shot and that's it.
Pretty much. What I would do now, and that's not how I started, but what I would do now, when I started, I would just take a map that I wanted to make and I would copy it as closely as I could, right? So that it was the same style, everything. Now I don't do that. Now I'll sort of redesign it. So I will take it digitally, in Photoshop, and I will just loosely draw mountains on top, or on top of it, if it's an existing map. If it's somebody's commission where it's their world, and I get a lot of this where people are like, well, they want me to do their D&D world, and I'll ask, well, do you have a map? No.
Yeah.
I can't just make it up, because that will take a whole lot longer, right?
Yeah.
Time is money, right? So I will actually have people do, I call it the idiot's way of making a map, and I'll just draw amoebas, really. If you were at the game hall little seminar, and we made a map in what, half an hour. We made a continent that had some places that were interesting, and we had mountains and rivers and forests, and it looked like a third grader drew it. But from that, you can hand that to somebody.
You can use that for reference.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
You can hand that
Yep.
to an artist and go, this is what I want. So what I do is I'll have them draw their continent, even if it's just an amoeba. You don't need to have every bay and
Mhm.
every.
Yep.
And then I go, well, mountains are the biggest and most impressive things in a map. So put your mountains, and now you put the mountains in, you put another amoeba. You go, okay, everything
Yep.
inside this blob is mountains.
Yep.
And if they want to get a little more detail, I'll go, well, draw a triangle
Mm-hmm.
where the biggest mountain in that mountain chain is.
Yep.
And how big it's going to be. That's all I want. Like, this is the biggest mountain. And then now you have mountains, so you have the high points. Well, now draw water, because water goes from high to low. So draw some blue lines. You don't have to be realistic. I don't care. Just draw rivers. Right? Blue
Yeah.
lines. Now you have the blue lines. All the spaces in between is where trees are going to be. So now take a green Sharpie and draw green blobs.
Yep.
Everything I know as the artist that everything inside that green line is trees. That's all I need, right? And then make me a list, or you can mark numbers, just dots and numbers, if you want, of special locations, cities, whatever, and make me a list. When we made this map of Greyhawk, I asked Jay. I knew how much time I had, how much time I wanted to invest in this, right? Because I wasn't getting paid. And there's a limit, to physically how much can you fit on a map before it starts being really busy, and cluttered. So I told Jay, give me a list of 30 locations. 10 of them are the top critical locations. A self-respecting map of Greyhawk will have to have them on. Right? I can't do a map of Greyhawk without the city of Greyhawk on it. So the top 10 have to be on it. The second 10 are important locations. If you can get them in, great. But if they sit right next to an icon that's critical, the critical is going to take priority. Things like that. And the last 10 are cool. They're interesting, but they don't have to be on it. So again, they're the last priority. Those are the ones you use to fill in the dead spaces, right? That are boring on the map. So now when I have that, I don't need to know anything else. I have the area. I had the reference, the beautiful reference from her. I took Anna's map, literally the image, and I drew, because it's top down, satellite image, and we were making an isometric map, so I just took it into Photoshop and just drew triangles, and this is where I'm going to put these mountains, and a few humps for hills, and this is where this ginormous forest is. And that's it.
But
once I have that, because you asked about the do-overs and that, once I have that, and once I start putting it on the hide, there is no, if I make a big mistake, I have to start over.
Anna was able, though, to give her layers of rivers, which made
Right.
right.
Yes.
So that was like
Yeah.
huge,
Yeah.
So everything in hers is in a layer, so that
Mhm.
she can just
Right.
yeah.
Being able, because all I needed
Yeah.
from Anna at first was just the landscape. I didn't need all the labels and roads and all of that, so I just needed just the landscape. Then add roads on top of it. Just make it simple for myself. I don't have to work because that map, you look at it, and if you look at all the detail, it's just too much. Right? It hides everything that's underneath, and I needed to build it up from the bottom up. So
And what's the, do you have wilderness symptoms? Do you have to completely scrap notes?
I've not had it often, particularly working in digital. There has been one. I'm not going to name the client. I actually, in all seriousness, what I tend to do with my process is if I'm drawing a map for you, I'm going to give you the sketch, and it's a very rough outside shape. I'm probably going to give you several shapes, different coastlines, different rivers, different where we're putting them, forest, how big is it, where are the hills, just all almost penciled out. Mix and match like swatches. Tell me you like the shape of the walls over here, but the POIs of this one, the hills of that one. I'll bring it all together. You'll get to see it. And then I'm actually going to start mapping out the main neighborhoods with you, and I'll float it past you. But then as I draw it, and I typically do this in 2 to 4 hour increments, I'll show you every single step. Sometimes you'll get 20 different versions before the ink work is actually done. But you've been an intimate part of that process. This is how I work with every single client. So if we then get to the end and you say the buildings are too small, that's a do-over. And I've had that once, just once. And I didn't actually do it over. I was like, well, okay, maybe we're not working together after all. But otherwise, I'd like to think because I just do pieces at a time, I can't go too deep into a mistake.
But I had my first project for Kobo Press was the original Southlands project, and I had a year to do that. I asked for a year. Wolfgang was like, "Oh, we're going to do. You can have like, you need a few months." I said, "I need a year," and I worked 6 months into it and I realized this doesn't look good. And then I was like, should I start over or should I try to get it better? And I mulled over it for 2 weeks and realized I'm going to do it. So 7 months into the project, I discarded the whole thing, started over again, and worked 80-hour weeks and had it done. And I'm so glad I did because that map actually looks okay even in my eyes even now 10 years after I did it. So that was but that was really really hard. And sometimes you have to so look critical but not too critical. That's the key thing. Meaning and be and I would say that take criticism well and creative and look at and listen to it and then discard 2/3 of it if it's not, but listen to it and take criticism because that's the only reason my Greyhawk map is anywhere near as good as it is because I've gotten constant, most part creative, smart, very informed criticism. And on the other hand, sometimes you get people that almost troll you by telling you everything that is wrong. And my trick was that in the beginning I did it in small pieces because my computers weren't good enough, so you only had to do it in small little increments. And so what I did was that now I'm going to map the shield lands, for instance, and then I posted on Cannon Fire forums and other places like I'm going to do this map. Can you tell me what should be there and so on? And the sources, I didn't hear anything. It was cricket. And then I worked for like months, and then I put it out there, and people criticized the hell out of it. And then I realized that what the heck? What if I just put something that didn't look that good, and then they criticized the hell of it, and I used that for my sources, so to speak. And I did that, and that way I thought, oh, I was smart. I took my worst critics and made them into my best workers. My problem was I told them that, and then they got really pissed. So I should never have said that, so to speak. But you can actually turn your worst critics into your best helpers, so to speak. So that was one of the
I know for a fact that I don't know about the others on the panel, but I know that Melissa posts 2 and 3 hour videos of talking through a section of the map. For instance, the Gaslight London one is in pieces online as you do it. So there's kind of no excuse for someone to say, well, I don't like the whole thing. Well, you have access to 2 hour pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. The worst thing. This is just for me personally, as a freelance craftsman. and maybe it's a product of my medium that really does not have a lot of room for error. But the worst thing you can tell me is, "Oh, I trust you. You're the artist. Do what you want." Hell no, no. I literally I have refused to do that. There was an author, a fantasy author, who his family was commissioned to make the map, and there were some areas there that I wasn't sure about. Maybe there were a little one area was just empty, just blank, and so I asked him if they can put me in touch with him. Because is it a surprise? Sometimes the map is a surprise for someone, and then you're like, "What crap?" Right? But they put me in touch with him, and I asked, and he said, "Oh, well, no, you can put whatever you want there." I didn't touch it. No.
Yep.
It's his baby, right? It's his world. I'm not going to make something up. But then someone comes back and says, "No, I don't like that." Unless they're willing to pay me to start it over again. That's great. But most of the time, that's not how things work. So, if you're going to commission somebody else to do it for you, have a lot of information. But other artists may be like perfectly fine with making stuff up. I'm not.
So real quick, we got like 15 minutes left, and I just want to make a quickie announcement. If we count, I'm asking a strange question right here. Are you two both couples groups? Okay. So we have 16 unique individuals counting the couples, and we have 15 things to give away. So we got anyone in our community want to forego? But yeah, we counted you two as couples. Yeah. So we have we have some good stuff. Alyssa's giving away 10 maps. 10 of her maps.
I mean, I already know most of you guys.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I
Cool.
would be happy to let another.
Thank you, Roy. That's awesome. 10 maps from Melissa, 4 Troller Game Castle Keepers guides, and a $25 gift certificate to Frog God. We'll give them out, and we'll go. The young gentleman here. Well, when we end, we'll let you guys go first, then we'll have the ladies go, and then we'll have the gentlemen go after that, and you decide what you guys all want. By the way, I have a question. Is anyone here new to map making or is interested in doing it to start? Is any?
Why the hell are you here?
Yeah. The reason I'm asking that is
Yeah.
the reason I'm asking that is you have questions of them like to get started, what you should do or what you should utilize. Yeah.
Yep.
Skill. Skill questions. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a good question. Let me you can jump
You know,
in
you
at
go
any
for it.
second, so to speak, because that's a great question because fantasy maps handle scale differently than a lot of real maps do, and because you turn almost everything on most fantasy maps are symbol size. They're not real size. Even mountains and stuff are way bigger than they will be in real life, so to speak. And there you have first you have to decide well the overall scale, meaning coastlines and stuff, meaning if this coastline is 100 miles away from that river, how far is that going to be? That's what we standardly normally think of as scale. Then you have something that I've invented my own term calling feature scale, and that is like how big are mountains? If that mountain, in order to be and if you have like a map of a whole world, so to speak, or like an enormous continent, then you might have to have a huge feature scale. So mountains that are only 4 or 5 miles wide need to be 50 miles wide in order to look impressive. And that is okay when you have large things. But as soon as you start compressing it, let's say you have the world map and then you take just a kingdom map, all of a sudden that mountain that looked great on the big map, when you scale it down and just show the kingdom, all of a sudden it looks ridiculously big. And then you have to tweak it out. So that's one of the things. And the same goes with roads, but to a lesser extent. Meaning roads need to be wide enough so they can be seen in print and in the digital thing, which means that they might be 5 miles wide on it. If you shrink down like the size of the Flannies or Forgotten Realms or something on a book page, that means that each road is probably 30 or 40 miles wide. So then it becomes a stylistic issue. How wide do you want the roads? So look at them not from a point of scale, but from a point of style, so to speak.
Purpose.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing. And then you can have two roads that go 20 miles apart, but on the world map, just merge them into one. So think of them not as the physical road, but routes that are generally between big cities and stuff. And then when you move in and you have a kingdom map, then they become more of real depictions of roads and so on. So it's kind of tricky, but that's the way I look at scale, so to speak. I hope that was a little bit of an answer to the
Melissa
question.
Shafir on that question?
Well, and I don't want to drag us past time.
No,
Yeah.
we're plenty. We're good. We're
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
We got 10 minutes.
For me, I look at real world maps all of the time. I have I've lost track of the amount of times that I've actually had Google Maps out, and I zoom to different scales, and I'm looking at how much detail I'm seeing on the coastline.
Yeah.
Because you can overdo it,
Mm-hmm.
and it can look messy. And what roads are showing? Well, probably none at a certain zoom level,
Yeah.
right? And like Anna said, to a certain degree, you're going to exaggerate the size of a mountain or the width of a road or the width of a river. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's like, is it even visible at this sort of zoom level? So that's the way I tend to think of it, is what is visible at this level, and just stay within that. I'm a big advocate of less is more. You can well, here I am. We all
I was
love
gonna say,
doing
you
crazy
draw
details.
your own itty bitty
But I
things.
mean, there is a truth to less is more. You can overdo it, and I've done it too. I've drawn a very very intricate coastline, and it was too intricate for the scale that I was actually, and it just looked messy when I stood back and looked at it. It was messy. So that I honestly I just take a look at the real world maps.
I think that I'm going to sound like a broken record, but ask before you start, or if you're in the middle of, stop and ask yourself the questions: who, what, why, where, when. Answer those questions about that map. What's the purpose of this map? Not just in world, but also for you as a person. Why am I drawing this? If you're just, it's your passion to create that level, Anna Meyer level, an entire planet down to the porta potty scale, then you know what scale you need, because you have an entire planet as reference. You live on it, right? So you have it.
And let me just quickly mention what porta potty scale, because that was something
Yeah.
I invented when for my new campaign maps. I use 5 feet per pixel in scale. So meaning, so one porta potty is roughly 5 by 5 feet. So you can
Right.
see that's the porta potty scale. So that was the term came from my new campaign maps. I'm going to trademark that scale thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So between that and a really crude, blob with some shapes on it, there's an entire range. So just make some at least rough decisions on why am I doing this? What's the purpose of it? What am I getting at? And then you figure it out from there. Obviously, I don't give a shit about scale. I want it to look cool. That's it.
That's an example of porta potty scale maps. So that's a piece of Greyhawk. That's my new campaign. This is the new generation of Greyhawk maps. You have like a little town here, and this is, each pixel here is 5 feet, so you can see individual buildings, individual trees and stuff. So, and this is real 3D, so you can see it from that, and then you can easily extrapolate that and do city mapping and stuff that matches the surrounding terrain. So therefore, the term porta potty. Yeah. So
We have time for like 1 or 2 more questions. I'm going to start going around.
okay, Christoph.
I have a silly question just because I'm an artist and I'm into drawing things. I like drawing fjords.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think fjords are hard, or do you enjoy them, or like, I mean, it's a really complicated geographical.
You come from that part of the
Okay,
world.
yeah,
so go on.
I come from I even taken Christoph to Fjords once, so we've seen Fjords. Well, to me, since I cheat and use 3D terrain tools, then fjords are actually not that difficult, because fjords have very little erosion. They're basically just mountain, but that been flooded by water fairly recently, and therefore they're from a terrain creation perspective easy to do, so to speak. So, but that perspective. But when it comes to drawing them in various other styles, I can imagine they cause more of a problem, so to speak, because it's kind of that they're kind of dense and full of features a lot, because you get, and you also get, when you have it in isometric, or that kind of from looking at the side, you have one set of range of mountains, or and then another one and another one, and things important, all the villages and towns and stuff tend to be in those valleys that are kind of cramped in between mountains that are 6,000 feet high or something like, roughly something like that, and only a couple of thousand feet between they're usually about the same distance between in the valley as the mountains are tall. So yeah.
Have you ever had a map that had like
Fjords?
like that?
No, not really.
Yeah.
Nothing in that detail.
And Alyssa, have you ever done like a coastline that's got?
I actually purposely drew fjords for my Patreon. I want to say about a year ago. It was
Cool.
an experiment that I
Yeah.
wanted to go through. And I think I did a pretty good job, but I was studying the coastline of the fjords
Yeah.
pretty intensely.
Mhm.
The thing that I actually found to be the most difficult was the colouring, because
Yeah.
the colour of the water is very unique in that
Mhm.
part of the world
Yeah.
and hard to capture.
Yeah.
So I'm actually currently recolouring that map, and I'll be releasing it here in the next month or so. But what I think has turned out to be better a year on.
Yeah.
I'll send the version over to you so you can take a look at it.
Make that a symbol.
Anyway,
Okay, any more questions?
if you have questions, I'm usually at my booth here. Feel free to just stop by and chat.
Yeah.
No problem. Or if you see me in the convention, pretty much all of us are free to talk or willing to talk forever, unless we're doing
Oh yeah,
something else.
exactly. So if you got us talking about mapping and whatever, we can go on forever. So it's yeah. Mhm. And we will have the fantasy mapping show every month, and we will have the have topics. So please send topic ideas and put them in the comment of show what you want to see and stuff. So so we have some other interesting guests and stuff. I'm trying to get a South African that is really, really awesome at doing world maps using GIS and stuff. So that's something that I want to have him to come, Nathan Mangjian, that to come on and talk about that. We haven't got a time set or anything like that, but I hope to get him on because he has some other unique. He's the opposite of Fear here. With he used cutting edge technology to
Yeah,
map
I've got a
his
lot
work.
of things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh
A
yeah.
lot
You
of cutting
use
edges.
cutting edge technology literally, so to speak. So yeah. In the other sense of cutting edge.
I'm using obsidian. to cut
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
That's
Mhm.
good
Yep.
cutting edge.
Yep. I didn't realize that's smart. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And we'll see if Jay wants to wrap up the stream and stuff in a few minutes here. So yeah.
All right, so I've got three left up there, all maps. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, look, I'm running around like a
And if I
crazy
knew
man
that you were
here.
going to bribe the audience so well, I have to set aside to do a lot of prints for next year and see. So I'm sorry I didn't bring a lot of prints and stuff. Yeah.
This is a fantasy mapping show. We
Yes.
shower gifts upon them.
We
Yeah.
shower gifts.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
thank you. I mean, I know we were all running around, and you had to go to a different room, come back here. It was kind of a confusing day. Note that we really appreciate all the support.
Yep.
For the channel and for the show. It's just going to get better. I know we got more and more. We'll have more guests. We'll have more informative sessions. Please, reach out to Alyssa and Anna and say, hey, I'd like to have a show about this.
Mhm.
And that's what we'll do. And it's
Yeah.
once a month. So just note, it's not that hard to plan for monthly. We don't have to worry about it every week.
Yeah.
So, but we have a blast doing it, and I really appreciate it, both of them, to be a part of this and just to get the word out, because it's a lot of great things coming. And in fact, Anna and I this morning met with a company, and we have a major project. If you haven't heard about it, but we have an entire Free City of Altamira is going to be done by Troller Games, and Anna's going to do all the mapping for it. I'm going to do all the writing for it. And we're looking at about a year project, and we're really excited about it. So that's something that's going on. Looking forward to bringing more content out to the community. So if you need a card, please, I have a couple left. If you don't know where to reach us on Twitch, it's Lord Gazumba. really easy, all one word. So, any final thoughts here? Thank you for
Thank you
everything.
having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And go to the vendor hall, Noble Dwarf. Buy one of the convention maps, please, from them. Just give them a little bit of love.
Please do. And so, I guess we don't want to. I know there's another one coming in shortly. Does
Yeah, I
anyone
have some
any
cards here and stuff if
Yeah,
people want
absolutely.
to keep.
Any last
It's
questions from the
reaching me.
audience? Hopefully you got some good things out of this.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your time today, and please enjoy the rest of GaryCon.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Hannah, do you have a Sharpie?
Thank you.
You need to sign this.
I need to sign this.
Yes.
Okay.
I asked Rob.
Okay.
This wouldn't have happened without you. So
Okay. So
right there.
okay.
Not like you.
No, but
You didn't get to give away your $25.
Yeah, I
gift
did.
certificate.
I did
Excellent.
give it
Good.
away.
Okay.
Yeah, I realized that.
You're saying
I was hoping the real would do this.
Yeah. Stop by her booth tomorrow or today. Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. The questions I have, I've started, used to be retired Air Force intelligence.
Oh, awesome! You emailed me like a year ago or something. Wasn't it? Oh, it wasn't you. Okay, yeah, it was someone else who worked in the Air Force and stuff. Okay.
I started as a photo interpreter, so I'm looking at satellite
Yeah.
imagery
Yeah.
and kind of put things into that perspective.
Yeah.
I'm trying to even that into maps.
Yeah, yeah, and I've been a pilot for years, so staring at the world from above, and I love landscape and look at it. So I want to see what the fantasy world will actually look like. That's kind of one of my main goals. Not with all maps, but with a lot of maps. I want to, because we don't have the real world. We can go out in it. That's why I think we need to artificially. For me, that's important.
I was asking about the buildings and cities.
Yeah.
The number of
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Exactly. And
thank
yeah,
you, everyone on Twitch. Yes, of course, afterwards. Thank you, Twitch. Thank you. See y'all. Next show will be probably Sunday night. Well, Anna and I are here because we're not leaving on Monday. We're going to do a Gavin, 7 o'clock from the club like we did on Wednesday. It'll be a Sunday night Gavin wrap up. See who's around still at GaryCon. All right, but I'll post stuff on social media. See you all soon. Thanks.